Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. I've been away for a few weeks. I went overseas. I went interstate. I'm back, and I thought I'd test out this. This is the Boss Katana 50 Gen 3. This is the latest iteration of the Katana lineup. To me, already, this feels like an incremental upgrade. I'm going to mention that first, because if you've already got the first or second gen version, I don't feel like this is a massive upgrade in any way. But that's not to belittle it, because it suits a particular need. This is a great little practice amplifier, and I'm going to showcase some tones I can get without having to hook it up to a computer, because every time you hook something up to a computer, there's a million different options. There's option paralysis. You spend more time fiddling around with controls than you do actually playing. So I wanted to see what all of the channels sound like with two different guitars in this video, so that's what I'm going to cover. Again, this isn't sponsored. I borrowed this from my local music shop, Sky Music, so a huge thanks to them for the loan of this. If you want to check it out, I'll link it down below. Just know I don't get to keep it. No money's changed hands, and all thoughts about this amp are my own, and I'll give you my thoughts at the end, so stay tuned for that. Let's get into some tones. Let's start with some clean tones. Just know this is the actual sound of the amplifier in the room being mic'd up with an AEA N22 ribbon microphone. It's a great sounding mic. It really brings out the character of the amplifiers that you put it in front of. It's awesome. Now, this particular guitar is my Fender American Original, so we'll start with this Telecaster to begin with. Once we get over to some of the crunch tones, we'll switch it up to some humbuckers. So this is the clean tone, just in the standard mode with the variation button off, and then we'll test it with it on. Here we go. This is where this amplifier really shines. The clean tones are really nice, and they're dead clean. So if you want that, you'll definitely get it out of this amp. Now let's try the clean tone with the variation option. As you can hear, there's a difference in the clean tone voicing between the variation on and off. With it on, it's almost on the edge of Breakup, but not quite. But it's still very clean, just has a bit of a different character. Let's try the new push channel, which is kind of like the in-between tone. So think of that kind of off clean, kind of bluesy tone that can work great for blues, for country, all that kind of stuff. So let's have a listen. Now, while I was definitely enjoying this sound, it does feel a little bit thin in the room. I'm sure you can kind of EQ some of that out to some extent, but it definitely has a bit of a different feel to like a Push Deluxe reverb or whatever it is it's trying to emulate, but it does an okay job. Let us know what you think in the comment section. Now we're on the same push channel, but with the variation button in. As you can note out here, this gives us a much cleaner tone. And this is pretty usable for that sort of country stuff, which I suck at, but I tried my best to play some fingerstyle stuff just to sort of explain a little bit about the different sounds you can get out of this amp. But overall, pretty good. I'm not sure I couldn't get that off the previous version of the amplifier on the clean channel just by turning the gain up. But anyway, it is what it is. Over to the crunch channel on the amp. And this is actually pretty cool, but the next one with the variation is probably my favorite on this amplifier. So we'll take a listen to some single coils, and then we'll go over to some humbuckers. Here we go. And now we're over to one of my favorite tones on the amplifier. This is the crunch channel with that variation button enabled. So this will give us kind of like a ZZ Top style sound. We're going to start with the volume control down, and then I'll roll it up and you can get a good sense of the dynamics. Here we go. Now, as you can hear, that is a pretty solid tone considering the price of these amplifiers, but it definitely doesn't sound like it has the thickness or girth of like a Marshall DSL 40 on 20 watt mode, for example. It's not even close, but it's still very, very usable. Over to the lead channel on the amplifier now, and this is just with some delay and reverb, and I actually think this sounds pretty great. Whether I'm playing chords or playing lead, sounds pretty good. Let's have a listen. As you can hear, that's very usable, but when I turn the variation button on, to my ear at least, especially for some chords, it definitely gets a little bit muddy. Let's have a listen. Over to the brown setting on the amplifier now, which is another great sort of crunch sound. I think most people who like the sort of 80s will get a kick out of this. I don't play much 80s stuff, but hopefully this is a good representation of the type of sound you can get. Here we go. And lastly, when it comes to tones here, let's have a listen to the brown sound with the variation button in. I don't like this as much as with the button off. Again, it gets too mushy and a bit too sort of saturated for my liking, but everyone likes different stuff, but this is just my ear sitting here in the room. Let's have a listen. This amp's also loaded with a power attenuation circuit on the top, so you can switch it from 50 watts at full volume down to 25 at half, and then all the way down to 0.5 watts. Now, at its lowest, it's basically at my speaking volume. So I'll play the same thing 3 times so you can hear a difference just on the recording. And then what I'll do, I'll play the same thing again at 0.5 watts and boost it in post back to the same volume audibly for you listening at home or wherever you're listening to this video from. And then you'll get a good sense of how that recorded tone compares once I actually adjust the level. So let's have a listen. All right, let's wrap this up. I'm going to give you my first impressions and thoughts about the Boss Katana 50 Gen 3. Now, I've had the experience of playing the prior versions at home and in the context of a live mix. So I'm coming at this from a different perspective, but I have to keep in context who this amplifier is usually for. This is for someone who wants to practice at home, especially this 50. This is where it really shines. So irrespective of how I feel these amplifiers sit in the context of a live mix, some people might love them, but if you've ever played a tube amp and you compare it up against something like this, it's still not there. It absolutely isn't. But that said, this amplifier is very usable, especially in a home playing capacity. You can get great tones at any volumes, which is what it's all about. You want to be able to just plug into something without diving through menus or without hooking it up to a computer. And while you can hook this up to a computer and get option paralysis from it, the great news is you can just plug in and get a great tone. Whether you want a clean, slightly overdriven tone, a bluesy tone, a crunch tone, it's all in there. But it's one of those amplifiers you still have to find the sound that you like, so you'll be spending a little bit of time with it. But it was very easy for me, at least, to get the kind of sounds that you heard in this video. So that was without hooking it up to a computer, just twiddling the knobs on the top of the amp. So well done to Boss for its usability there. Now, there's a few things about this amplifier that I don't love. One, there's no Bluetooth connectivity. You've got to pay to play when it comes to that, which feels like a huge cash grab. I can't believe that's missing. All the digital modeling amps I've showcased on the channel over the last few years, I don't think there's hardly any that don't have Bluetooth, unless they were already old by the time I got my hands on them. So yeah, this just is a huge oversight, and I don't love that. And I think also you've got to take into account, if you've already got the prior version of one of these amps, you don't need this. Again, it feels a bit more like a cash grab. You get that new channel, that's fair enough. You get some new effects. I kind of feel like they could have probably just added this stuff to the older generation of amps through firmware. While a lot of amplifier companies are guilty of just re-releasing something like this every few years with a few new features, it's not enough of an incentive, I think, if you own the prior version. But this is just my opinion. If you don't own any Boss Katana amps and you get this, you're going to love it. But if you own the Mark II, I wouldn't buy this personally. I've owned a Mark II. I purchased one. And this isn't an amplifier that I would buy if I had have kept that. And again, if you're a live player thinking that this is the tube feel and all that kind of stuff, it still feels very different. But it feels great to play. It just doesn't have that big throw of sound like, you know, like a 20-watt tube amp does in the room. If you're comparing that push sound up against the push deluxe reverb or a Princeton cranked, it's a very different playing experience. And I encourage everybody to go to a store and actually give it a shot. But again, I think the people looking at this will no doubt be, you know, home enthusiasts, people who want to play at low volumes. And that's where this is better than a valve amp, because you can get those sounds at a much lower volume. So a huge thanks to Sky Music for the loan of this. I really appreciate it. I won't be buying one, but it's definitely been a bit of fun, and it was great getting some good tones here at the house. So let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon. See ya.